it's Karen Burniston here with my monthly designer challenge video. The theme this month is Let the Music Play, and I needed a birthday card, so I'm going to be using the piano keys pop-up combined with the Katherine label pop-up in a side fold window card. The three main dies that I'm using on the project are the piano keys pop-up, Katherine label pop-up, and the music charms, and then I'm also using sentiments from our birthday belated clear stamps. And then in more of a supporting, optional, easy to substitute role, there are two additional dies, the fishtail banner out of the Lorna label pop-up, and then a birthday hat out of the birthday charms. I've decided on a 5x6 side fold card. So I started with a piece of cardstock, 10 inches wide by 6 inches tall, scored in the center for folding. I've recently had some questions from students about my design process. Now, I am a huge fan of pattern paper. I have been collecting it for decades. Some of the papers that I use might be decades old, but what I usually do is I just go to my stash and I just look for pattern papers that inspire me for whatever the theme I have going or the dies I plan to use. I always start by picking my pattern papers. And of course, paper collections always coordinate, but I don't really limit myself to that. So I just look at papers individually. And I liked, in this case, that Happy Birthday paper from Photoplay and those free-range chickens from My Mind's Eye. First thing I'm going to do is wallpaper the inside of my card. So typically with the piano keys pop-up, you would use a top fold card. So this is the way that it would typically be installed right into a top fold card. So in imagining my challenge card where I would have a window that would line up with the piano keys in the close position, my first thought was, okay, I'll just make a top fold card with a window in it. But that presented a couple challenges. The first challenge is that the window would have had to be skewed pretty close to the top of the card to line up with those piano keys in the closed position had I used that typical top fold card. The second challenge was I wanted to put a trumpet on the front of the window pane, but in a top fold card, as the card opened, then the trumpet would have to flip upside down. So my solution to these two challenges was to incorporate the Katherine label pop-up because that creates a top fold within a side fold card, and then I can use that to animate the piano keys. So I cut the mechanism for the Katherine label. I ended up using a pretty heavy black cardstock for this just because I knew it had to pull up those piano keys. What I'm going to do is I'm going to trim off the upper part of the L that has the tapered tab on it, and then I'm going to use the fold line of the tapered tab to create a new base tab for my mechanism. So I'm going to use that tapered tab with some strong glue. I'm using my LINECO neutral pH adhesive in my fine tip bottle. We sell both of those items on our website. And I'm just going to connect that tapered tab at the bottom because I really don't need a box out at the end of the Katherine label. I really just need a tab to hold it down on the card. And I don't need any of that other business with the L, so I can just trim that off. So I'm making a very simple mechanism here from the Katherine label where I'm just using it to create a top fold within my side fold card. Both of the diagonal folds fold away from me like a mountain fold, and I'm just going to hit those folds with a bone folder to make sure that they're nice and crisp. Okay, so that left triangle is going to fold under, and it's going to attach to the left side of the card, just butt it up to the fold. And I'm going to use the top of the pattern paper as my guide. So I need to add my glue underneath that triangle. So I'm going to coat it with glue, and then I'm going to unfold it so that I can butt it right up to the fold of the card. And if I lift the right side of the card, I can jam that kind of right up into the fold. And then I'm also making sure that I'm even with the top of the pattern paper. So it's just the triangle that is glued down right now. Okay, now I'm going to bring the rest of the mechanism over to the right side of the card. And what's going to hold it on is going to be that tab that I created. So that rectangular tab, I'll add glue underneath it and press it to the card. So typically with the Katherine label, I don't install it in this flat, fully flat position, but this is a pretty simple alteration to the mechanism, and it actually works really well to install it in that flat position. What's nice about installing it that way is that you get the fullest open, and you really do want that because you're going to ask this mechanism to pull up those piano keys, so we really want it to open as far as it can. Now my new little top fold is not quite wide enough for the piano keys, so I'm going to add some adhesive to the front and extend it out. So I just chose a piece of the same black cardstock, 3/4 of an inch tall by 4 1/4 long, and that's just going to bring it out to the end of the pattern paper on the right. And that will give me more than enough width for the piano keys. I'm going to go speedy fast here on putting the piano keys together. Now, if you are new to that die set, there is a full assembly video for it that goes a lot slower, and I will link that assembly video at the end of this video and in the description box below. But all I'm doing is I'm just working the folds in both pieces. On the black keys, those are all mountain folds, so I'm going to make sure they're all going as mountain folds. And then there is a slot and tab system where I just have to wiggle the tabs down through the slots, and that locks those pieces together. And then if I engage the folds at the base of the black keys, it will bring the rectangle in line with the white one, and then I can just add some adhesive and glue those two pieces together. All right, so that is now ready to go inside the card. So I'm going to put it back into the flat position again. I'm going to butt it up to the fold of my card. And in this case, the fold of my card is my Katherine label. So what I want is I want adhesive on the black section starting at the fold line and then going towards the back. So at the fold line of the black keys, then going towards the back, and then all along that back rectangle. So that's where I put the adhesive. I keep everything nice and flat. I'm butting it up to my Katherine label, and then I'm just looking at the sides to make sure that I have an even amount on both sides that I'm going to close the card, and it'll pick those piano keys up. Okay, I need to find the flat position of the piano keys, and that's when the two sections are folded forward. So I don't fold just the tapered tab forward, I fold both sections forward, but it is only the tapered tab that gets the adhesive. So adhesive on the tapered tab. Then now what I want to do is close the card, but I'm going to reach in there and kind of help that stay closed so that it finds the correct position for that gluey tab. And then I'm just going to go slowly the first time I open it. I like to just press against the keyboard and push it open where I can give that tab a really good press. So now I have the piano keys working in a side fold card. I'm adding some pieces of temporary tape to the middle label from the Katherine label set. So that's the dotted label. And then I'm going to set that blade side up on my keyboard in that closed position. So I'm just kind of closing the card and peeling back the front to where I can reach in there and figure out the location where I want the window in the closed position. And I want it to line up with that keyboard. So now I'm going to carefully close the card, and because of the tape that I have on that die, it's going to move the die to the other side of the card. And that is the location for the window that will line up with the piano keys in the closed position. And I can give it a little adjustment here, just kind of make sure it's straight. If it's a little crooked, I can fix that. Okay, for die cutting the window, I need to place the card towards my machine and then add the cutting pad so that it just covers the label. So I want that cutting pad to end just past the die that I'm trying to cut. And then I need to carefully roll this through the machine. And the idea is I just want to clear the cutting pad. So I'm rolling slowly. I'm pushing my pop-up down a little bit in case a piece of it goes under the rollers. But as soon as it makes the thump of clearing the cutting pad, thump right there, now I stop rolling because I can pull the cutting pad out the back end of the machine and the card can come out the front of the machine. Now, could you make a template of this? You've got one card made, maybe you even do it out of scratch colors, and then you measure down to where that die needs to go, and then for future cards, you just cut the window before you install the piano keys. Sure, you could absolutely do that if you wanted to, but I find it easy enough to just do a little bit of careful die cutting to get the window cut afterwards. I want that same window cut into the front pattern paper, and I didn't do it all at the same time because my cardstock was thick and I didn't think that the die was going to go through 2 layers of pattern paper and the cardstock. So instead what I'm going to do is temporarily hold my pattern paper in place on the front of the card while I open the card and trace the window. Now, even now, I'm probably not going to use the die to cut that window because I may not get it exactly perfect. And it's just as easy to take my scissors and cut a little bit outside the lines because I'm going to pretty up that edge with a frame afterwards. So I'm just taking my scissors, fussy cutting out the shape and going outside of the line. And it does not have to be pretty. It just has to be a little bit outside the line to where the frame later will cover it. Now, before I glue that to the front of the card, I want to add my window pane. So I'm just going to use a tape runner around the opening. Transparencies tend to like a dry adhesive, so I'm going to put that on with a dry adhesive, and then I'll switch to my glue to attach the whole piece to the front of the card. To make the frames, I just use the two largest labels nested together. So the same one that I used to cut the window is the interior die, and then the largest label is the exterior die. Tape those two together, die cut them at the same time, and then you'll have a frame that will perfectly fit the opening. And then you can see how well that will just pretty up that rough cut edge of the pattern paper on the front of the card, and you'd never know that that was fussy cut. Now I'm switching to the music charms for the trumpets. So I added double-sided adhesive tape to the back of my chunky gold glitter before die cutting so that my trumpet will be a sticker. And I'm going to attach that to the front window pane. And then I want a mirror image trumpet for the back side. So this time I need to cut through the adhesive side of my glitter paper. And I did roll that through a couple of times to make sure that it would die cut down through the adhesive and the glitter paper, and that I would get that perfect mirror image trumpet for the inside of my window pane. And this is where that side fold card really works out, because the trumpet just flips from pointing to the right to pointing to the left. If it were a top fold card, it would flip upside down. I've die cut some staff lines from the music charms, and I'm going to trim off the vertical so that I can gather the staff lines together, and then I'm just going to peel up the edge of the trumpet and add those staff lines so that the music will be kind of coming out of the trumpet. Then I extended with some additional staff lines out to the edge of the pattern paper, and then I'm going to decorate those staff lines with some of the music notes out of the music charms. And then I repeated that same decoration for the inside trumpet. Something I was a little worried about is happening, and that's the pull of the piano keys is really putting a lot of strain on that triangle. And I was afraid of that. So it's pulling up a little bit. The best thing to do would be to sink a staple into it, because that will hold it down. However, I already decorated the front of the card. But I decided I would put my staple through anyway, and then I'm just going to cover it with a music note on the front of the card. And when I go to make this card again, I'm just going to preemptively staple that triangle down so that I do not have to worry about it pulling up from all of the pull of those piano keys. And for my next card, putting that staple through from the beginning just means that the pattern paper on the front of the card will cover it, so I don't need an extra embellishment. So one thing I was noticing is how cute those chickens were on the front of the card, and then I don't have any chickens on the inside, so I decided I needed to rectify that. So the first thing I did is I just die cut one of the chickens out using that same dotted label die. It's a little bit big for the card, but if I can tuck it under the frame and then trim the edges, it'll fit nicely in that lower left corner. I tend to like things in odd numbers, so I decided 3 chickens inside the card would be perfect. So there's number 1. And then the second one is I fussy cut out a chicken. And this one I thought would be cool, kind of popping up on this triangle right here. Now I may need to do a little bit of that in the closed position, kind of figuring out a location, because I want to keep the chicken out of the window. I don't want it to be visible when the card is closed. I also don't want it to stick out of the card at the top edge when the card is closed. So using that closed position can help me find a position for my chicken where it stays hidden when the card is closed and then pops up in a fun manner when the card opens. I assembled a party hat from the birthday charms, and my chicken is going to wear the party hat. I do have to choose a location where it stays out of the window in the closed position. So after gluing it on, I'm going to quickly close the card and make sure that it's hidden. It is. There's one little extra piece of the chicken's comb that's kind of sticking out in front of the birthday hat. I'm going to trim that off. And then chicken number 3 is going to be just the head of a chicken that I fussy cut, and then I'm going to stick that to the underside of the piano key so that the chicken is peeking out from underneath. I thought another glittery trumpet on the back side of the Katherine label pop-up would be cool, because you'd see it a little bit as the card opens and closes, and it kind of disguises the seam of where I attach the 2 pieces together. For a greeting, I'm going to use some stamps out of our birthday belated set. So I've done It's Your Birthday and Hip Hip Hooray. And I die cut each of those phrases out using the fishtail banner from our Lorna label pop-up. Now, if you didn't have that Lorna label pop-up, you could absolutely just cut those by hand. I'm gluing the 2 fishtail banners together, and the phrases are very close together. And then what I can do is attach those inside the card. I'm just going to butt them up to the piano keys and just centered. And then what'll happen is that as the card closes, the piano keys will come down and obscure the upper greeting. So the "It's Your Birthday" won't be visible until the card opens, but you can read "Hip Hip Hooray" through the window when the card is closed. Okay, almost done with my card. Just a couple of labels layered together and then put in that lower right corner. That will be the place where I'll sign the card. And then I'm just going to sprinkle a few more music notes to the card's interior. And then on the front, I just made a little cluster of notes in that upper left corner where my staple was, and then added a birthday hat to one of the chickens. My finished card measures 5 inches by 6 inches and can be mailed in an A7 envelope. Now, the reason I needed a birthday card is because I was making and filming this video on my twins' 26th birthday. So I had this card done, but we had a dinner date and I did not have a second card yet. So I decided just to copy this one completely. The only thing I changed out is I needed something different than the chicken paper because I didn't have 2 pieces of chicken paper and I didn't want the cards to be identical. So for the second card, I decided to use some paper that had gnomes on it. Now, I did have enough of the happy birthday paper because I had the other half and it was enough to do a second card. So some things I changed on this one is I extended the Katherine label first before adding my tab. And that way I could put the tab a little bit further out on the piece. Just had to make sure that it was in far enough that the piano keys would cover it. And moving the tab, it could go anywhere along the extension. I just decided to move it because I felt like it was going to give that long extension a little bit more stability to have the tab further out. I also learned from the first one that stapling that triangle on is a good idea, and if I do that right now at the beginning, then my pattern paper will cover it. I decided to just add the pattern paper to the front of the card after I die cut the window and then set my die down into the opening and run it back through to cut the window into the front pattern paper. So that saved me the time of fussy cutting, which was great. What wasn't great is I hadn't thought about the fact that I couldn't then put my transparency between the 2 layers. So there's always a solution. What I ended up doing is just die cutting the transparency with the larger die so that it would fit behind the frame and then just glued them on as a set. So big messes were made, but I did manage to finish the second card just in time to leave for dinner. So substantially the same. Gnomes instead of chickens, change the greeting just a little bit. It's your birthday, celebrate with cake instead of hip hip hooray. But primarily the same card, same measurements, same techniques, everything. So you really can just copy these designs, make them your own by changing out the paper choices and the themes. If you check the description box below this YouTube video, you will find supply links as well as a link to the blog post. And on the blog, you will find photographs of my cards as well as links to all of the wonderful music inspiration by our very talented design team. Thanks for watching. If you click on the website link, you'll go to KarenBerniston.com where you can purchase these dies as well as find links to our other social media accounts. You can subscribe to this YouTube channel and check out some of my other videos. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.